In control of Catalonia, Spain pushes back, firing the government and the police chief. But will that simply exacerbate Catalans' ambitions to split? What happens next? This is Inside Story. Hi, I'm Patty Culhane, and welcome to Inside Story. In less than 24 hours, Catalonia has declared independence. Spain has responded by stripping the region of its autonomy and taking control of its government and police. The Spanish Prime Minister dismissed Catalans' leaders, including Carlos Puigdemont. Now, the Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, called for a snap election in the region on December 21st and handed over Catalonia's reins to Spain's Deputy Prime Minister, Soraya Sáenz de Santamaría.
Estas primeras medidas que hemos aprobado después.
The first measures that have been tasked are the following: to depose the president of the Catalan government, the position of the deputy president, and all other members of the Catalan government. We will also abolish the delegation abroad, known as the embassies, except in Brussels, and the Secretary General of the Catalan police will also be suspended.
Well, several thousand people have been taking part in pro-unity rally in Madrid. Pro-separatist supporters say they'll continue their fight for Catalonia's autonomy regardless. The independence declaration has not only been rejected within Spain, several countries, including Europe, the European Union itself, and the United States have all said they won't recognize an independent Catalonia. Catalan's dismissed leader has said he wants a democratic opposition to the takeover by the Spanish government without force or violence.
Citizens, you all understand the period which has just started is one that we must continue defending with civility and peaceful commitments. Your actions are the reflection of a mature country that knows the direction it wishes to follow. We have to continue. We have to persevere with that attitude that will help us succeed without violence and without insult, being inclusive, respecting people, symbols, opinions, and the protests of those Catalans that disagree with what the majority in Parliament have decided.
So let's bring in our guests. And first, in Barcelona, we have Enrique Ulete de Cal, a senior professor emeritus at the University of Barcelona. In Madrid, we have Spanish writer and political analyst Daniel Gascon, and in Bruges, Belgium, via Skype, Luc van Legenhove, a senior researcher at the Institute for European Studies. Welcome to you all. And I'm going to begin by asking each of you to answer as quickly as possible if you have any idea what happens next. Enrique?
It's extremely hard to say. The central government has taken legal control of the region. The president at 2:30 this afternoon implied that he was going to push back. In other words, that there was a situation of two governments in confrontation.
Daniel, to you, what happens next?
Well, I think that is very difficult to say. I hope that the state can return to Catalonia to legality as soon as possible, and I think the elections for the 21st are a good idea for doing so.
And Luke, over to you. What happens?
Well, I think we are in a very difficult dynamic at this moment, so anything is possible. But basically there will be a confrontation between the Catalan, or should I say the former Catalan government, and the Madrid government. And it will all depend on how Madrid will organize that takeover, if there will be some use of force or not, and the response of the government of Catalonia in reaction to that.
Daniel, I want to ask you, we've been talking here, trying to think of one time in history where a government simply just handed over peacefully land to a country that wanted to separate. How exactly did President Puigdemont think this was going to end? Did he have a plan B?
Well, what I think is this bid for separation is not only illegal, but it's illegitimate. If you look at the figures yesterday, 70 members of the Catalan parliament voted yes, out of 135, with the opposition absent, against the advice of the lawyers of the Camera. These 70 members of the parliament, they represent about 47–48% of the vote, which is about 30% of the population. So what we are seeing is is something a minority trying to impose the rights over a majority. Is an idea of democracy which is against pluralism. It's not only a thing about legality, it's about legitimacy.
Well, I want to ask you this, Enrique. I mean, if you think about it, if he had been successful, if Spain miraculously said, sure, go ahead, his people would have woken up without a passport, without any sort of trade deals, without access to the euro. They would have lost a lot of infrastructure potentially, such as their electricity, which is provided by Madrid. So what exactly in the president's mind did he think he was going to accomplish if he was successful? Would it not have launched your city into absolute chaos?
I think it's not really a germane problem because it's a question of bluffing in poker. You've got two poker players faced off and they've been bluffing for 2 months straight. So what is real is not so important as what is apparent. The independentists have managed to construct a narrative that's much more efficient than anything that the Spanish government has put together. Spanish spokesmen have been surprisingly reticent at creating an effective description. All they've done is talk about the law. From the Catalan nationalist point of view, what counts is the people on the street. They've made their own revolutionary law, and they're going forward with it.
So, Luke, over to you. The Prime Minister now is sort of in a very difficult position. He's boxed in, is he not? I mean, if the leaders won't simply go away in Catalonia, is he going to send in the tanks? What does he do?
Well, once again, it's difficult to predict what is going to happen and what persons are going to do. But the point is that indeed, from a legal point of view, Spain is totally in a right position to do what it is doing. I mean, it's a state that is to a certain amount decentralized, and that decentralization can be turned back by Article 155. And indeed, it would be unthinkable that any country in the world would just like that give up one of its richest regions. But of course, the problem then is how do you do that, and how do you build your own narrative that goes against the nationalist narrative of the separatist movement?
So, Daniel, let me ask you that. Let's put the legality or the illegality aside here. We're talking about people's actual lives, millions of people. So how does Rajoy become the leader of them again without inflicting any sort of pain?
So, there's an idea of Vincent Berger that I like, which is the idea of those heroes that retire, that back up. What we've seen is like a push, a confrontation, and I think the former Catalan government has to back off, and that this goes back. And I think something that is going to be very difficult is how to manage the frustration of so many people that have believed in this hope. No, I think.
Well, let me ask you this: you think he's actually going to back off? Is that what you're saying he needs to do? Do you have any indication that he's going to?
Yes. I think I hope so. I hope this happens, and in the end that sensibility imposes. No, but of course we don't know, and there is very complex technically, and the public opinion in the situation is very tense at this moment. But I hope this goes for the better. No, and I hope the Catalonia's autonomy is very soon restored, and that Catalonia goes back to legality, and that we can have a better and more diverse Spain.
Now, and Enrique, I want to ask you this because, again, where everyone's talking about legality, but we're not talking about legality. We are talking about we are now at the brink. They've been bluffing, as you say, in poker. So now at some point, someone's going to have to show their cards. Are you getting a sense there in Barcelona that people are prepared for whatever that could be, since nobody knows what's going to happen?
No. There's great uncertainty. There begin to be doubts, but the brinksmanship continues. Puigdemont has basically challenged Rajoy again. The rumor on the radio as I was coming to this, to Plaza Catalunya to be filmed, was that Puigdemont was going to announce elections for the 20th of December as opposed to the 21st, which is the ones that Rajoy is convoking. In other words, from here, it still remains, from an independentist point of view, in your face, that clear.
So, Luke, let me ask you this, because if this stretches out and they do competing elections or it goes on for months, do you think the potential economic impact of forming your own country is widely understood by the people? And this is to you, Luke.
Well, in any case, there is indeed a very strong economic impact. First of all, for Catalonia itself. We've seen all the companies that are moving their seats out of Barcelona. But I think it will damage also the whole of the Spanish economy and perhaps even the whole of Europe, because Spain is connected to the rest of Europe by the European institutions and not at least by the euro. So there is indeed a very big economic reality that has to be considered. And as far as I can see, that has not been really on the agenda of the narrative of going independent and forming a new state.
Now, Daniel, I want to ask you this. People could blame the two current leaders for the standoff, but this is not a new issue. This has been going on for a very long time. How did we get here?
Well, that's a very difficult question. Something which is very strange is how around 2012 independentist sentiment increased, no? And I think this was mostly a top-down idea, because of course there have been tensions and Catalonia has always had a strong identity, but Catalan nationalists have always tended to believe in the modernization of Spain. They were more or less the engine, something that brought Spain closer to Europe. And I think with the economic crisis and also with the impact of the economic crisis in the political system, some part of Catalan nationalists decide, well, Europe is fragile. Spain is not a very good mark at this moment. There's a sentiment of grievance of things like the statute, and we are gonna try to do this. And I think at the end, if you think about it, how this has resulted in a loss of autonomy, in economic loss, in reputational damage, and in exacerbating tensions inside the population. So I think this bid has backfired, and I think that's something that we have to think about when we let us be guided too much by emotions and by enthusiasm.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm going to put this to all three of you. If you could please answer as quickly and succinctly as possible. Is it too late for dialogue? Could they really start talking, and what would that look like? Who do you expect would be in a strong enough position now to make the first move and say, let's stop, let's talk? To you first on that, Enrique, but I'll get all three of you to answer that, please.
The Spanish government considers that it's in such a strong position it doesn't really have to dialogue. It considers it's tried enough. And the Catalan government in self-exile, I don't know how to put it, considers that it has done everything it could by its own self-proclaimed legislation to possibly accommodate the Spaniards. So it continues to be a standoff. Neither will go.
Luke, will they talk?
It doesn't look good.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Luke, go ahead to you.
They will have to talk in the long run, because dialogue will be the only way to get out of this situation. But we need an agenda for the dialogue. And the way I see it is that we have to put two things on the table. On the one hand, Madrid has to be prepared to reform itself into a truly federal state that gives a lot of autonomy, not to certain regions, but to all regions in Spain. And secondly, the Catalan government or representatives will have to make sure that they accept the idea of being a regional state within a state. And maybe we can add a third dimension to that. That is that in Europe, in the European Union, we have to rethink the place of the subnational regions in the governance structure in Brussels.
Daniel, will they talk?
I think at the end they will have to talk. I think the important thing is that the rule of law is established, and after that I think that Spain has to be generous, and rights of minorities have to be protected. But also after this we will have to understand that this is an opportunity and a duty to reform Spain. So I think the rule of law has to win. And then also a lot of creativity and willingness to reform have to be in place also after that.
Now, Enrique, I want to ask you this question. It seems to me that the elections could be, just from an outsider's perspective, these elections, if Madrid and Barcelona and the leaders could agree that, yes, these elections will be free and fair, and let's find out what the majority of people want. We didn't really get that sense from the vote for independence. Could this be a way for everyone to save face and to actually decide the issue?
Well, Puigdemont had a chance to accept convoking elections himself, and he finally decided not to do it. So I don't see an easy way out, meaning that most of the reasonable proposals that have come from people around the conflict on the Spanish side, on the Catalan side, have ended up getting nowhere. And I see an extraordinary stubbornness on the part of the independence movement. It sees that it has done nothing wrong, and so it therefore is willing to push the struggle for the long term. And the Rajoy government is not willing to, has not shown itself willing to yield on anything except obedience. So I don't see any way out of this.
Luke, I want to ask you this question. It's about the European Union. They have not shown any willingness to intervene. They've sided with the Spanish government. They said it's not their place to mediate. Could somebody step in and mediate? And if so, who?
Well, I think from an institutional point of view, indeed, the EU has no mandate to intervene because this is strictly sensu an internal affair of Spain, and it has no instruments. So the only thing that could happen, and that probably is already happening, is that behind the scenes, some influential persons are trying to mediate. But officially, there is no place at this moment for the EU to do anything.
You know, Catalonia is not alone. Across the world, you see people who have, in different parts of the world, said, we maybe want independence as well. The fact that the entire world has sided basically with Rajoy, what message do you think that sends? And I'm going to send this to you, Daniel. What message does that send to people across the globe who might be thinking along the same lines as the Catalans?
Well, I think it makes us think how populism and nationalism, sometimes we think nationalism is a thing of the past, but it can be easily activated. So it shows us that the past is never that far behind. And also it shows us that the dangers of a populist politics, because it creates fractures in society, and everything becomes black and white. And I think it's better to think about how pluralism and the liberal structures allow us to have these conflicts of interest and different sensibilities. They can be negotiated in a better way. So I think in many ways the Catalan bid for this independentist movement of is similar to Brexit or to other movements that have an element of taking back control, but that are also delusional in some ways.
But we're seeing this across the globe, as you just mentioned, this nationalism, Luke, and I want to ask you about this. Catalonia is just another version of what we've seen with the election of Donald Trump, with Brexit. Does this continue to snowball, basically, not just in Europe, but around the globe?
Well, it is true that there is a populist dimension in what is happening, both in the Brexit affair and in Catalonia. But the bottom line is that the right for self-determination of peoples has to be respected, and this is mentioned in the UN Charter. But this only makes sense if we are talking about situations where, let's say, the human rights are in danger or something like that. For the rest, it's a bit of a strange thing that people everywhere tend to say, well, we want to be independent, we are better off on our own. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, this happens the most in rich regions or rich countries, because there is a dimension of solidarity with the rest of their country, and that is, of course, something which is difficult to go along with. I mean, I think President Tusk said this morning or yesterday that he doesn't want to end up with an Europe or EU of 95 members. And that is what could happen if everybody starts thinking when we are on our own, it will go better. And the fact is, of course, that with globalization, this is a delusion. This is not true. We are living in a globalized world, and it is integration that will make us cope with globalization.
Enrique, I want to ask you about his thoughts on that. What do you think? Is this just another version of Brexit that we're seeing here? Is this going to continue? The President Donald Trump, Brexit, now Catalonia.
No, I don't think so. I mean, in one sense it is. In one sense it is just like the elections in the Czech Republic. There is a general rejection of old-style politics very clearly in this society, both for independentists and for unionists or Spanish nationalists, however you wish to call it. I don't see, I repeat, an easy way out. The independentists are ready for a very long haul. And long haul means they're talking about 5 years or like that for the future. They're not expecting any short-term solution.
And Daniel, let's say Rajoy wins and the independents, they lose. This doesn't go away. That spirit of rebellion does not go away. It only gets stronger. So what happens? What could he do to try and make them say, okay, well, now we have enough. We don't need to separate completely, which of course he would never agree to.
Well, I think one of the things that the Spanish forces have already talked about this would be a constitutional reform to see how the status of Catalonia could be protected in the Spanish constitution. I think this always has to be will have to be validated through voting, and I think this would be an opportunity. I think the Spanish constitution, 1978 constitution, is very good. It's very advanced. It doesn't need a big rewrite, but I think some things could be updated. And 2 million people more or less support independence. But I'm sure some of them would be happier with a change in the status quo. And I think there's through concessions and agreements and through compromise, I think that's the way to do things in a democratic way where we can
Enrique, let me ask you
accommodate our differences.
No, I get it. Enrique, last question to you. Catalonians are very split amongst themselves. How do they come back together again?
I have no idea because, for instance, one of the other speakers, I think Eugenio, said that Catalans have to realize that they are one more autonomy within a variety of autonomies. That's exactly what Catalan nationalists, I haven't said independentists yet, don't want. They want a special autonomy. And if they don't get that, it's going to be very hard to integrate that large third of the population that is there and sectors that can identify with them. I see no easy solution. A lot of this has been very bad politics on both sides.
All right, thank you all. This has been a very intelligent and informing discussion. No, we don't know where it goes, but I appreciate your perspective on this. Thanks to all of our guests, Enrique Ucele de Cal, Daniel Gascon, and Luc van Legenhof. Thank you very much. And thanks to you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Patty Culhane, and the whole team here, bye for now.